Hello and welcome to another episode of the Get At It Gaming Plus podcast, your bi-weekly podcast where we kind of talk about whether it's video games, anime, movies, comics, it's whatever we want to talk about. Today is a special one. I probably should start like we normally do, right, Alex? Where I say, I'm Ben,
Yeah, and then I guess I'm Alex. Hopefully.
and we have a this is where it usually starts. We have a special guest with us today. We have Nick here. Was so gracious to come and be on the show, and he's going to talk about his new game that's coming out. Super excited about it. Alex and I had spent some time on this game over the weekend. Nick, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people listening.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I'm Nick, and I'm working on this game called Which Way Up Galaxy Games. So the game is basically if you took Super Mario Galaxy and turned it into a 2D platformer party game, and also kind of a little bit of like mini game vibes, Mario Party. So we have like 12, or we're launching our game with 12 Galaxy games is what we call them. And they're all kind of like little takes on gravity mechanics. So you're either going to be kind of doing a kind of bumper car scenario while you're orbiting a large star, or you're going to be running away from a black hole, or you're going to be doing some sort of king of the hill type situation, or shooting comets into goals like you're playing soccer in space, and a bunch more stuff like that. But yeah, that's what we're working on.
Yeah, Alex and I spent some time on the weekend playing it. I do want to say that Alex obviously picked up quicker than I did. He won like every.
I won every game. You know, that's just how it works. You know,
I was close a couple times. Lots of swearing was going on in my house, but I did get those vibes of those. I really did enjoy it. Which, by the way, the demo is now available on Steam, and we'll have a link in the podcast here. But also, we'll do a link on our social media, whether it be X, Instagram, to kind of like so you guys can all check that out. So one thing I was going to ask you is like, besides telling us a little bit about yourself that you definitely did, like tell us a little bit more about like your studio, your background, you know, like how long you've been doing game developing.
Yeah. Well, this studio is basically, this is our first title. So we've got a studio called Total Flip Studio. And I created it to make this game. I had the game idea first, and I wanted to apply for a grant from Australia, the Australian federal government, and we kind of applied twice and didn't get it, and we got a grant on the third try. Nice. But you need to be a company to do that, essentially. So I kind of just started off as an indie dev, making prototypes, trying things out. I've released a game previously, which was a very different game. And it's called Ashy Lake of Light. It's a little puzzle game that's I released on mobile and on Steam. And it's about a little firefly that you have to kind of navigate or direct around some lanterns floating on a lake, and they will orbit around. Well, orbiting seems to be a theme for me. They'll kind of orbit around these lanterns as though they're attracted to the light. And depending on how bright the lanterns are, changes how much they kind of orbit around or turn around. But yeah, that was a very different game. And so I'm kind of trying something completely different now. I guess you learn a lot from every project that you do. That game, Ashy, was kind of like me making a game for myself, a game that I really enjoy because I enjoy kind of calm and meditative and puzzle games a lot of the time, or I have in the past, as well as other genres, of course, but that's kind of like where I went naturally. But I guess you start thinking a little bit more about marketing and that kind of thing as you go as an indie dev. So that's kind of where we're at now. In terms of myself, my background, I started kind of programming when I was young. I was programming Lego robots. I don't know if you ever had this, but there were these little yellow bricks that Lego had, and you could attach motors and sensors to it. We had this competition in Australia, and it's still running, I'm pretty sure, called RoboCup Junior. and they had three events. So they had what's called dance, rescue, and soccer. And so we did the soccer event in my team. So we created two little robots made out of Lego. Later on, we actually made them out of different material, but we programmed them to play soccer against two other robots on a little field in an automated way, which was a very fun way for me to kind of get my introduction into the world of programming. And after that, I think somewhere in the middle of university, I developed a little navigation app. Like, I think the iPhone had come out, and I was excited about trying to make an app for it. I also had started uni and I didn't know where to go anywhere, so I decided to solve that problem for myself. Created this app, and then this other company found me, and I created this app called Lost on Campus. And it's used by a bunch of Australian universities, or at least students at Australian universities in Australia, and I think a few places internationally. And then after that, I did a few other gigs here and there. I kind of went into some kind of creative studios, and a lot of the time I would be doing prototypes or experiments, either on web or in Unity. And then I ended up, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, at the Google Creative Lab, which they had an arm in Sydney, Australia, and I was there for 2 years. It was a really awesome experience to learn about all that kind of stuff that they do there, which is a lot more prototyping, like creative prototyping and experimenting with new technologies. And yeah, after that, I think I pretty much started prototyping with other little gigs in between. I started prototyping the game, and yeah, it's just been going since then. I haven't been working full time on it. I just started kind of, just making a little experiment, seeing if it worked, and then went from there in little short bursts here and there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So yeah, I was wondering if we could kind of get into the gritty of all of this for people listening at home. Can you just walk us through basic premise of your game? Because I know you had some slides and stuff, some visual aids to help people on youtube.com/GetAtGaming. You should, if you're listening, you should go to the YouTube version instead, and you can see this presentation. So yeah, if you want to share some of that
screen. So this is just a little visual reference to show. So we've got these aren't actually in the game yet. This is something we're working on kind of behind the scenes. We kind of created these little, like, I don't know, futuristic video game cartridges that also look like cards, if you like. That's kind of how I imagined them, that they kind of plug into the universe, and that's how you activate them. And so they are like the representations of each little game. So I don't necessarily need to go through all of them and explain them all. I can at least say that the demo has 6 of them, 6 games that are available, and they are going to be the first 6 to the left side. So Constellation Catch is kind of like a territory war where you have to collect zones by kind of running across stars, and the stars have little timers on them. So once you collect it, then it starts to count down with the last person who touched it. And then if someone else, other players want to come and grab that star so they can collect it after that timer goes down. And that's how you get points. There's Event Horizon. That's basically like an endless runner where people are running away from a black hole, which is encroaching from the left-hand side of the screen. And the platforms and the planets that you have to jump on kind of randomized and get more or less difficult. And there are boost pads and jelly platforms and ice things and all sorts of other obstacles. And we're going to be adding more stuff like that before we release. Gravipult is kind of like, how would I describe it? You have to protect your planet and also attack other people's planet with bombs at the same time. So you're going around, you can collect one bomb and hold one bomb at any time, and then you can throw it somewhere in the map, and it will kind of land on a planet, using the gravity, and then it will go off after I think 9 seconds or something like that. And if there's a bomb on your planet, then you'll have to go try to defend yourself. Comet Collect, kind of like soccer, except we call it reverse soccer because of the multiplayer nature of the game. We kind of had to turn it on its head. So it feels very much like soccer. You're putting a ball into a goal, but instead we think of it as like collecting comets into your little zone and getting the points from there. And that's one of my personal favorites. I think that was probably one of the first games I prototyped. That was like my dream because I really got into Rocket League a bunch of years ago, and I played a lot of Rocket League. And I don't know, I kind of I've always thought how it would be fun to kind of have zero gravity Rocket League somehow, where you're almost like in control of a rocket ship or something like that. It's kind of like, Rocket League without driving on the ground. You're just using the rocket to maneuver. And it's not like that. It doesn't feel exactly like that, but that's kind of like the inspiration. At Star Ring, you have to stay in the ring for your points to go up. Overload is basically what's it called? Bomb tag, or hot potato. So you have to run around if you have the bomb and touch other people, and kind of transfer the bomb to them, and then you'll go off if you hold the bomb for too long. So those were the 6 games that you guys played. How did you find them? Any favorites?
I liked it. Oh, go ahead, Alex.
I was about to say, I mean, you already said my favorite when you said it was your favorite. Like, I really like soccer-based games. Like ever since even playing like Banjo-Tooie. I don't know if you remember like being like the little rock banjo guy doing soccer back in that area, or Rocket League. Just there's so many games that like where you're collecting things or just playing a soccer-based game, and I really did like Comet Collect.
Nice.
I liked Event Horizon. I really liked that style there. Just I don't know, like it was funny because like even though these are all competition games, it felt like with the music and everything else, it just felt like very like calm, and you it's not a button masher. Like you really do have to like some of these. The Comet one, I would have liked it if I would have won that one, but I didn't win it, so I can't like it. But it's all very much like these mini games. I could play this for quite some time and be okay, unlike when I play Halo Online and I'm like screaming at the TV and my computer and stuff. But yeah, I think those are probably that's the one I like the most.
Yeah, Event Horizon, I think you described it well from a lot of people that have play tested it. And I think Event Horizon is a lot of people's favorite. That's just what we found from testing. And it's a funny thing, like as we've developed these mini games, we've tried to figure out like what is it that makes a game like good? Like what are the qualities that make people enjoy it more or less? And it's not like everyone loves Event Horizon. People certainly have favorites that aren't Event Horizon. But it kind of strongly comes out on top. And I think part of it is just how intuitive it is. It's like something that people understand. You just run away from something, or you run to the right of the screen, and the camera tells you what to do. And what you described as well, I kind of think of it as like this: you can enter a bit of a flow state where you can kind of start to feel how the gravity works and get a better understanding of it. And how you're supposed to be platforming and jumping in the game. So yeah, it's funny to watch people play Event Horizon, and all the different strategies that come out. Because if you kind of just stop running from the black hole and you try to attack the other players with your little comet push ability, then you can end up putting yourself in danger just because you ruin your kind of platforming edge.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's great to see all these together here, but so you said that this is your type of game. So what inspired you to create a game like this here with like all the different mini games and things?
Yeah, good question. Should I switch back?
It's up to you. If you have more things to show, we can switch back and forth, whatever.
Oh yeah.
Well, we can go back and forth.
Okay.
Maybe we can talk about the remainder of the video of the mini games if we want to talk about
Sure.
what's in the works.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'll just turn it off. So the inspiration, I guess, I think it came out of more of a functional thing. I originally wanted to make a co-op adventure game or something like that. I really love co-op games, and it's something that I've wanted to make for a long time. And I always imagined the characters in this world playing in a cooperative environment. But it kind of came down to like scope and features and how much work it was going to be. Because creating a game that has like lots of content, a large map, narrative elements, it just takes a lot of time and a lot of testing. And not that this doesn't take a lot of time, but it's kind of it's nice that they're in very discrete chunks. And I like to kind of think about this when I analyze some of my favorite games. Kind of doing game design in discrete chunks is really, I think, useful for the developers, but it also leads to good game design. So an example, really simple example that I like is kind of the shrines in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. The reason they're really cool from a developer perspective is that you have these chunks, these instances, basically, that you have 120 of them, say, whatever the number is. You can then just offload all of those to your team, divide them up. Okay, you game designer, you're going to work on these 10, or maybe one of the programmers decides, I'm going to make a shrine this week or something like that. But it's really well parallelized. Like things can happen at the same time. But in other game design circumstances, it might be hard to work on like certain parts of the game at the same time for different developers. So I think that's a really nice aspect. And being able to kind of have these from a kind of game design philosophy perspective, I think it works really well also because they almost feel like collectibles, or they're very tied to collectibles. They're kind of like, and they're places you can go. I think it's good to kind of create a sense of a journey or a kind of manifested journey. So if you can take the character to new places in a really easy way, just like, teleport them into a room or, load a new scene or whatever, then I think that's a really easy win. And it also creates, these languages to use, the idea of a shrine and then using it again and again. It works really well. And so I don't know, for that, in that way, I think I like the fact that we have these reproducible rounds that feel the same, except they feel different, and they're unique. So I had always wanted to have, when I decided that I wanted like a competitive round-based game, that I was trying to figure out how to bring some uniqueness into it. Like we can have different maps, or maybe power-ups, but I guess one of my core like design pillars was that I wanted to keep things as accessible as possible, and also I wanted to kind of keep the skill gap low. And I think that abilities and power-ups and things like that in some games can lead to a very like skewed, I guess, or large skill gap or skilled balance somehow. So like, if someone gets a rocket launcher that will only spawn once in the map and they hold onto it forever, then the game is just, completely unfair in some senses. And so you have to do all this balancing, which is like a huge part of game design, just to do balancing of things. And so that was another reason why having different kind of mini games worked for me, is I had to do less balancing. I do have to, balance things within one mini game, but without abilities, like unique abilities, then it becomes a lot easier. And yeah, obviously that kind of connects to the accessibility thing. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people when they're playtesting ask if the different characters that we have different, abilities or skill sets. And certainly that's something that I love. I played a bunch of Smash Brothers when I was younger. And yeah, I'd love to make a game like that and do all the game dev of balancing different characters out. But I think it's just so hard and time consuming. You need like a decent budget and a team and time.
Oh yeah.
So this is kind of like my first, well, not my first game, but like the first game I've done that's decently big, and I'm working with a team of, it started as 3 people originally. Well, it started with me, and then I got a concept artist, I got a 3D artist, and then I got a composer, and now we're, on and off, maybe close to 7 people working on the game. Obviously not all full time, but it's a big jump for me, and it's been an amazing and scary experience. But I think I'm very lucky to be able to be working on something that I enjoy this much.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I will definitely say like the balance is like super important with there. So I totally get where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we continually have to kind of balance each game as we go as well. So, I mean, I take the game to as many playtesting events as we can. And every time we go, we watch players, we see what happens, and pretty much I'm making notes every time on every mini game. And I kind of have this kind of like bar graph in my head where different mini games are going up and down in terms of how fun or not fun they are, or which one is worst. And we'll always be kind of working on the worst one, but at the same time we had to finish all the mini games, so it's a hard juggling act. And so there's a bunch of changes that keep happening. I think I'm actually curious which version of the demo you played, because I think I didn't update it yet. We're actually about to release an update to the demo, which will have a bunch of changes. So I'd be very interested to hear what you think about the changes, especially with like Comet Collect. I made this change that was quite fun, actually, a week ago or so. I just felt like it sounds like you guys probably picked it up quite well, but some players find Comet Collect to be one of the harder games, just maneuvering around and aiming and stuff like that. So I wanted to make it a bit easier and just increase the number of goals that are being scored. So I added this kind of magnetism effect, which kind of, when the ball gets close enough to a goal, it will kind of veer in a little bit. And I was a little bit worried about making it too easy, but I think the balls will just keep spawning, and you can just keep scoring goals, and I think more goals is just more fun.
Yeah. I mean, I got to get better then, because I can't let Alex beat me all the time. This kind of reminds me like your stream where you had, and we were playing Mario Kart, and I was so close. Stupid blue shell every time.
You gotta get good.
Yeah, I gotta get better. I mean, I own it. I should be getting better.
Yeah, but no,
are there any games that you're always beating Alex in, or in the other way around?
We've got some games that we both play differently. We have a lot of games we play that we were playing at the same time. Not so much multiplayer. Probably the one multiplayer I play the most, and Alex is gonna start laughing now, is Halo Infinite.
Of course.
I play the multiplayer. If you were to ask me to bring up my hours there, I would be embarrassed. It's probably ungodly amounts of hours. But it's like your game. So I could jump into a match, I could play a couple rounds, spend an hour, and then jump out, and I think that's why I like it so much. I've been trying to get Alex to play that forever. He will never play that game.
I'm too busy. I'm too busy. Playing Kingdom Hearts 2 EXP 0 mode, where I'm level 1 the whole time. That's all I've been doing.
That's still crazy to watch, man. Still crazy to watch.
Yeah, but as far as Ben and I competition wise, I feel like he's better at older NES games. I mean, just look at the NES games behind him. Like he's better at like platforming and stuff for those older games, because like I was more of Super Nintendo kid, right? So like I was very much like Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario World, or Kirby Superstar, like that kind of stuff is what I really grew up. But like when Mario 3, I'm horrible at Mario 3. I know it's true, but like he's really good at Mario 3. So like there's certain games like that to where like even if they're not necessarily multiplayer, we definitely have things that one is better than the other. I'm sure he's better at like Tekken or something than I am, because I'm horrible at Tekken, but I'm good at
My
Marvel vs. Capcom, so you know.
my kids learned a long time ago with the last Tekken, not to play with me. I have two older boys, and they just Fortnite and all the stuff they run their mouth with, which I'm not good at. And so we played Tekken, and I have one character specifically named King. He's a wrestler, and my horse got so mad because I have been playing that game since PlayStation 1. So,
Yeah, wow.
it's that. But yeah, so I see your point on like, you know, with this, with how your game is, and like us spending time with it. Um, I think we get the unique opportunity to spend time with games like this and see these demos. But I, I really did enjoy the colors, and I enjoyed like just a lot of that there. But it was so funny because like, even though all the characters you said are like pretty much the same, you know, all around, I still felt like it was cool picking different characters and doing all that. So
Yeah. Uh, I'm actually curious. You were telling me about, sorry to go backwards. You were telling me about your collection of games in the background there before we started recording. Is that kind of like your? Does it feel the same? Is it like a Steam pile of shame? Like, do you have games that you've never played, or maybe you touch once, like put it in just for the sake of it, and then you never touch it again, or is it like you have a good system?
So NES is well known for having just broken games. I could give an example of Total Recall is broken in certain aspects. At one point or another, I have probably put these into I have an old school NES. I have original. I have at one time or another put them in there. A lot of the games, because of Nintendo's Switch Online, a lot of games have been coming on there, which is really nice. So I play, if I can play them on the Switch, I'll play them on the Switch. But it is cool, like on a Saturday, to pop a game in, let the kids play. And so this I'm kind of proud of, because this is my second time collecting it. The first time I was like, I don't really want this anymore, I'm going to sell it. And so I sold it, and then I regretted it. And then the second time I started again, I was like, look, I'm not going to sell it. And I have some expensive titles in there. I've had people offer me money, quite a bit of money. But, I always tell this to Alex. I said, man, I will never get to 314 game titles ever again for the prices I paid. And we've gone to like flea markets and found them, um, you know, online auctions. So this is what I'm kind of proud of, when we have friends or whatever that come over for dinner or whatever. That's what they'll gravitate to. Is that they're like, how many do you have here? Or like, I didn't even know this game was made on there.
Yeah.
It's like behind Alex there, he has some crazy ones back there that when we first met and we first started talking, he was like, oh yeah, I've got this and this back here. And I was like, no way.
How I have every Japanese and English version of Final Fantasy VI. So I own a Game Boy Advance version. I own the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom version. I own the PS1 versions of it. I have a Chrono Trigger up there. I have the 3 Xeno Saga games. I love .hack, so I own a lot of .hack things here. So like a bunch of Japanese, as well as like the expensive N64 games and the books and the manga. And yeah, like those are the things I gravitate towards. A lot of JRPGs for the most part, or platformers. So those are the things I collect the most. And this is just the video game section. There's more in my living room. Before we were recording, like I talked about like Lupin the Third. I own every single Blu-ray that's released in America for Lupin the Third. I also own every single like Detective Conan, like a case closed thing that's ever released over here as well. I own a bunch of anime, Evangelion. Like, yeah, I love so many different things, and it's nice when I can have said thing and display it and let people borrow it too, depending on what it is, depending on how expensive it is.
I'm not allowed to have those things in my living room because my wife says no. Like this is I work from home, so this is my office as well. So I have to blur everything out when I have meetings or Zoom meetings or Teams meetings. I didn't do it once, and everyone was like, "Is that a Ninja Turtle back there?" I'm like, "It sure is." And then it goes into like non-work topics, and my boss is like, "You got to blur that out because everyone just keeps asking questions." So
yeah, I really love this kind of culture of appreciation of nostalgic video game stuff or just gaming paraphernalia, and I actually kind of jealous of people that kind of collect more physical things. I don't collect as many physical. I think I have heaps of GameCube and N64 paraphernalia in my cupboard somewhere, but I don't really like display them. But I think a good friend of mine, I remember going over to one of his houses when he lived somewhere else, and he had a really beautiful case. He had set up like a nice case. I think the place he moved into, it had a glass case, and he had put he had splayed all these games out. It was so satisfying to me. I was like, why don't I do this? But also I wonder like what this fascination is that we have about the collecting them first of all, but I guess just the nostalgia. Like, how does it speak to us, and how does it connect to us? Like for you guys, when you like go back into your room and you see them, does it kind of kind of bring up memories of you playing certain games with different people? You'd be able to browse and be like, oh yeah, that game, I played that with friend X, and this is the one that I borrowed from this person and never gave back, or something like that.
I have movies like that where I'm like, oh yeah, I have a movie actually sitting on my shelf where I'm like, I should probably sell this, but because I'm never going to see this guy again. And it's like, I Am Legend, like the Will Smith movie on DVD. I'm just like, I accidentally borrowed this movie and never gave it back to him years and years later. I'm like, he probably won't miss it. I'll probably get $1 for it. It's fine.
I think for me, like a couple of the games in there. So when we got a Nintendo, it was my older brother that got it because he was mowing yards. We got it the time it came out, and so we got a Nintendo with Super Mario, and I think that's what my memories with this is that. So the first thing that I got once I started collecting were games that me and him played together, and so Double Dribble, Pro Wrestling, Bases Loaded, I have all of those already, and for Christmas this year I bought my brother. I'm looking to find an NES, but giving him an NES and getting him the exact type of games that I already have, so he can have that same nostalgia there. I remember us playing Super Mario super late into the night and then getting busted by my parents because we were supposed to be in bed. We shared a room and we had a TV in there, makeshift TV with an NES. So yeah, for me,
that experience.
For me, when I look at those, that's what I see.
Go ahead.
I see the nostalgia. So
yeah, I had the same thing, and I'm sure heaps of people have that experience with their siblings. I guess it's when you're younger, maybe you're much more competitive. I think now that I'm a bit older, I think I'm still competitive, but I try to kind of squish it down a little bit because sometimes in certain environments that competitiveness can get a little bit toxic, and you kind of learn to be competitive in a nice way when you grow up, or at least it's nice to learn that ability. Not everyone does. But I too remember playing late into the night with my brother in various games, and I'm the younger brother, and he would always win when I was up until a certain age, and then I started beating him, and then he would get super annoyed, of course, and then we'd have to keep playing until he beat me, and that's why we were up until 1 or 2 a.m. playing the same game while I'm falling asleep, and you have to wonder, should I just let him win so I can go to sleep? Am I good enough to not make it obvious that I let him win?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of have the same thing with my older sister, because she's older than me by about like 4 years or so. So it was really her Super Nintendo when I was growing up, and so a lot of things that I came to really enjoy were just by osmosis because she was enjoying them, like Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles, just stuff like that. Those were things that I really grew to love because of her. And so like I remember playing Turtles in Time all the time on Super Nintendo together, or there was a Power Rangers single player platformer for Super Nintendo as well that I remember playing a lot. Again, with Kirby, like playing multiplayer Kirby, or not Ken Griffey Jr., but some other baseball game. I think it was like Super RBI Baseball or something like that. There's certain games that really have a lot of nostalgia for me. And a few years ago, one of them was NBA Jam. So I was able to get a complete in-box copy of NBA Jam and give it to my sister for Christmas like a few years ago, because she has a Super Nintendo as well, because we used to go to my grandparents and they had a Super Nintendo there, and after a while they didn't want it anymore, so my sister took it, and then I still had our childhood one, so then now we both have one. We don't really trade or give away games to each other or anything, but like that was one where I found an NBA Jam somehow. It was really, really cheap. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to get this for you, because I remember renting this all the time. Because at least back in the day for me, like it was always rentals. It was always video game rentals. It wasn't purchasing games for the most part. Maybe if you're really good.
Yeah.
I think that's the right move. Another aspect of all this that I find interesting, I don't know what your guys' parents were like, but my parents were kind of, either neutral to negative about video games, classic, they'll rot your brain, whatever. And so, well, I think it's interesting, at least in your case, Ben, that you kind of obviously much more positive, and I think, just the next generation of people of our age are just going to be much more positive with their kids about video games. And if you have an understanding, if you're a gamer yourself, then you're going to be teaching, good, I guess, values in playing video games. Not that, there are just one type of game. Like there are more games than just Call of Duty or Fortnite or something like that. There's there are huge collections of genres and subgenres and cultures within cultures online, and like it's such a huge and interesting landscape, and I think it's cool that we get to kind of have those relationships with our kids and the next generation, which I didn't really get, like that kind of positive energy. We kind of have that vibe where we have to play things in secret. It's like a forbidden fruit, which is kind of fun in a way as well, but it'll be an interesting shift, is what I think, I guess.
My oldest will go from, he'll have this Call of Duty or Madden kick, and then just over the weekend, he finished Kingdom Hearts to get the secret ending. He's very much like different genres, different types of games. He platinumed Spider-Man 2, so he definitely, my kids all have like very much different. Now my daughter, who's 4, she only plays on a tablet. We've not got her a console yet, but she will only play stuff with princesses. That's her thing for right now. But it's nice because, my wife and I both understand of like, we watch how much they play. We set up the parent stuff on their Switches, but letting them just really explore. And they know, like, if we go to the store, like they had birthday money and they were like, oh, I want to buy a game. Oh, I can't buy this because it's T rating. So they're smart enough to know that, but they all play such different games. Even my wife, who isn't a gamer, I got her Hogwarts. She's a big Harry Potter fan, and she played that for over her summer break. She's a vice principal. She played a little bit of that over the summer break. So I think me personally being a gamer, me understanding that is like, I want them to have these experiences and these open experiences like that, and to really just kind of like, it's not just, oh, I just want to finish the game. Like there's story, and sometimes there's games with no endings, so that's okay. So I think I've done a very good job of like teaching him the right way. My parents were okay with it, but I tell you what, in the summer, my mom would come downstairs in the basement and like, you guys played too much Nintendo and just unplug it. So you don't dare play Zelda because if she unplugged it, it's gone, right? So yeah, you just remember like if hey, I'm gonna start this long game, do it at night when they go to bed, not during the day because she would kick us out. So
Yeah. I always remember kind of like trying to convince my parents that I could buy a certain game because my mother was a teacher and I would always take like the education angle. It's like, oh, look, no, mom, it's a puzzle game. You can learn, it teaches you things. And that was always my angle. And I stand by that, I think, games still teach us stuff. Some
yeah,
more than others, but certainly it was a tactic that worked for me a few times.
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. To get back to your game for a little bit, though, we've been talking about a lot of different games and genres and styles and all that. Specifically with the art, what was the overall inspiration for the aesthetic of the game and the art for the game? Because it's, as Ben said, and as I guess as we both said, like it's very approachable. Just the whole game just feels happy, even when I'm beating Ben at a game. He's not too upset because he's like, oh, this guy's dancing around, it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're probably going to add some more emotions and facial expressions before we release the game. It is a good point, but in general, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that, as I said before, I've wanted to kind of keep it accessible, and the game design, or the character design, has kind of come from a place of me being a huge kind of, I guess, Nintendo fan, first of all. And so I like that kind of really crisp, simple character design where they're all just kind of like super, like they're caricatures of personalities. They're very unique. They contrast well together and they have really unique silhouettes. So we kind of started from there, but also in a space environment. I like the idea of taking cosmic or space-related concepts and trying to create the characters based on those. So Sprout, actually have little Sprout buddy here.
Oh, nice.
I probably need to turn off my blur. I don't know if I can do that easily. There he is.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, we're making these little guys that we're going to be kind of selling or giving through reward tiers on Kickstarter. So we're going to have a Kickstarter very soon, and some of these little crocheted plushies are going to be on there. But yeah, Sprout is, the manifestation of life. We've got like Luna, which is the moon. We've got Sunny, which is the sun, and stars, and like Maggie is kind of like a force of magnetism, attraction and repulsion, just in the physical world. Prism is kind of like a representation of light, and so a lot of them kind of just came from there. And like I said, maybe it connects to that educational aspect. I kind of like, I have always enjoyed learning things through video games, but not necessarily learning things, but just having my curiosity evoked somehow. And I think for a younger audience to maybe play this game that's set in space and kind of see these characters that represent certain ideas, that maybe they're kind of like a little bit evocative, that encourage them to be a bit curious about space, or why that character looks the way that it does. Like, why does that character have a pyramid on its head? Oh, it's named Prism. It's something to do with how light is refracted. If their parents are around, like, might spark up conversations like that. So that's kind of where it's come from in a big way. That I didn't really want to make something necessarily complicated. I like the wholesome vibes that it gives, and I just hope that it kind of brings some joy to a bunch of different people. And I think if I can get people to people who wouldn't necessarily enjoy an aesthetic like this, to play this game and enjoy it, as well as other people that like the art style, then I feel like maybe I've captured a larger audience. More people can enjoy it and bond over it. So that's kind of a lot of the ideas that led us down this road, I think.
I think that's pretty awesome. I was looking at the names of things when we were playing it, and that all makes sense now of that. And so, with that being said, though, I know you mentioned before like specific games and stuff, but were there any other like developers or games specifically that influenced this game here or your work?
Yeah, definitely. I have a good friend and kind of colleague of mine named Paul Kopetko, and he released a game called Boomerang Fu a few years ago. I don't know if you guys have seen or played that game, but it's a very similar multiplayer party game, and my game is very much inspired by his. I was his friend during the whole 5 years of his development, and I watched his kind of progress very closely, and I ended up being able to do some level design for half of the games on Boomerang Fu, which was really a really awesome experience for me. And I think just watching him play test the game and seeing how much fun people had playing that game was really part of the reason as well that I wanted to make a game like this, is that I just love, that nostalgia of playing local multiplayer games or with your friends and family when you're young. And I think for me, it's just kind of the idea of making one is kind of like a bit of a dream. And it's fun to be able to test it and play it and see people have that same experience. Like, online games are obviously super popular in our generation and right now, but like the shared experience in the same room, I think it's just, you can't really like beat that in a lot of ways. And I know it's not necessarily the most lucrative decision to make a game like that, but you have to be very lucky if it's going to be. But at the same time, I think I just went down this road because it's something that motivates me and I find fun to play myself. And so, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I remember a lot of times playing Super Mario or Super Mario 3, So, yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from on that.
So you kind of mentioned a second ago how you're helping out your friend with game development stuff. Did you use the same programming tools that you've used before for this particular one, or did you have to like learn something different? Like, what types of tools and software did you use to help develop this particular game?
Yeah, Boomerang Fu was developed in Unity. So is Which Way Up in Unity. A lot of the prototyping and experiments and stuff I've done before has been in Unity, and that's just where I have the most experience. I find that it's just a very, while it's not necessarily maybe the most efficient tool or maybe the most versatile, maybe it is pretty versatile actually, but it maybe isn't the easiest thing to use. So, a lot of people are Unreal programmers. A lot of people in the indie dev kind of industry are into Unity, and now Godot or Godot is gaining a bit of popularity, but I don't really know how much, to be honest. But I think that Unity has always been kind of like, because I've done a lot of experimental things, like working at the creative lab, for instance, we would do weird, zany experiments, and Unity just kind of affords you a certain level of control, whereas Unreal is really great at giving you a template to make a first-person shooter, or the same thing for a racing game. So if you want to make, a genre that's very well known, but then, twist it in some way to make something unique but approachable or known already, then I think Unreal is good at that, as well as a bunch of other things. Like Unreal seems very good at making things pretty, and the graphics pipeline, I think, is very good. Whereas Unity, I think, the graphics pipeline is great, but you have to customize it a bit more. You have to do a bit more work to make things pretty, quote unquote. But I think it's kind of like it's helpful in that sense to make things that are less cookie cutter, if that makes any sense. Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I think you start a new project in Unreal, and then maybe they enable motion blur and chromatic aberration and a certain effects just to make things look nice, but maybe then the developers don't turn them off or experiment with other techniques. But having more of a blank canvas can be kind of powerful, more difficult in some ways, but yeah, kind of push you to try different things.
Yeah, and I see a lot of games being built on Unity. Like um, it seems to be like that one that I play a lot of indie games, and so seeing even like ones that aren't indie games being built on that, you know, it tells me that it seems to be like one of the top sorts of programs that people use for developing games. And like you said, you're able to kind of go in and experiment around and it's very free in that aspect.
Yeah, it's very fun. Have either of you dabbled in a bit of game development or used any kind of game development software yourselves?
I have not, but my 16-year-old has spent a lot of time with Unity. I know at one point he wanted me at one point to buy him like the Photoshop suite, like all of them. So for video and for pictures, I was like, well, first off, no, unless you want to take a loan on the house for it. Um, it's so expensive. But he got into Unity a while ago and was making um, drawing things and turning it into 3-dimensional. He was programming on Minecraft at 13. So he's very much smart in there. Does he like all the other subjects in school? Absolutely not. But like this year he's super excited because he gets to take design classes, so he's gonna work with a lot more things. um, I have watched him do it. That's way watching him do it, I'm like, gosh, this is like way out of my realm. He's like, oh, you gotta do this and you gotta do this over here, or you could do this. But I did like the aspect of him being able to go in there and just kind of like, if he had already something in there, like experimenting, well, let's just do this and see what this does, or do this over here. Like, I always thought that was pretty cool how that works with that program.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can what it lets you do, I think. But yeah, I'm always scared with like game design. There's so many different things that can be made, and sometimes you think, oh, so much creativity out there. Like, is there much room left for people to make new things and be inventive again? And then people just keep creating new stuff. And
Yeah.
it's funny. I kind of have this feeling where an indie game will come out, and I'm always like, oh my god, that's so obvious. Why didn't I think of that? It's like such a perfect idea. It's like they've kind of found this spot in idea space and been like, yeah, that's the convergence of all these other concepts, and I'm gonna like do this game, and it's kind of like so smart and it works so well. So I really love the medium. I think it's one of the hardest mediums to kind of master. Like, you can do, music is an incredibly difficult medium, obviously, but you have a game that you can incorporate music, or you can build a game around music, and you can explore it super deeply, like a game that kind of focuses on pitch or something like that. Or you can go super broad and kind of incorporate music into the game just as a layer, which is dynamic. But it's just, you can explore so many facets of, I guess, human experience and media, I guess. And so, yeah, I find it very overwhelming at times, honestly, but it's super fun. And I think you meet a lot of interesting and intelligent people in the indie dev community, a lot of more intelligent people than me, but it's super fun to kind of meet all their personalities and talk to them and learn stuff. That's another good thing about indie dev, I think, is that you're always learning. It's like constantly discovering things you never thought you would know or find interesting. So
yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that the same way. With just us doing like this podcast, for example, we've evolved greatly over the years. Like, this is our 4th year now, right, Ben? Yeah. And so like you just always learn things just by talking to people and networking and things, and it's always a grateful experience to just learn from others, like whether that is from other content creators or even just doing things with other people like you, for example. Like there's always something to learn, regardless if it inherently affects your product or not. There's always just something interesting that you can just gravitate towards, and maybe that will help you in the future on something else. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one interesting aspect that I find that's tangential to that is just kind of motivation as a general subject. I think, doing something like making an indie game or running a podcast is really hard work, and it takes a lot of, I guess not for everyone. Some people are geniuses and they just get things right on the first go. But I think it takes a lot of failing and failing and failing.
Yeah.
Like you're just constantly getting things wrong and learning and kind of having some sort of, either you're insane, you're crazy, or you just have the motivation from somewhere. I think it's probably a combination of both. Like, I think for me, it's like a bit of obsession. Like I have some sort of obsession wiring in my brain, and also just like either competitiveness or I just kind of don't want to give up on something until I kind of get it right. But also, like, that can be a bit, I think, maybe unhealthy to be too obsessed with things. And sometimes you just have to take a step back and look at it as more of a journey. It's like you're just constantly, whatever you're trying to do, whether this project fails or succeeds, this episode does well or not, this game, does well or not, it's all just like a stepping stone, and you'll make another game or you'll do another project or something like that. And it's really hard to look ahead sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm gonna get into numbers because I don't care, but our most recent episode we did of Lupin the Third of Castle of Cagliostro, that episode it's not pulling numbers at all, but it was a passion project that I wanted to make everyone watch, and maybe someday people will look into it and watch the movie and just learn from it. But it's for, at least for us here, we've never really went into this podcast thinking, oh man, we're gonna quit our day jobs, we're gonna do this and that. We always did it as a hobby first. Granted, we stumbled a few times in the beginning. Like there were times, I mean, Ben remembers, like when we were at his house until like 2 a.m. because we recorded like 3 different episodes because we were thinking too far ahead. We were thinking too big for what we actually were at the very beginning. We were thinking, oh man, we used to have another host as well. And we're like, oh man, we're going to be a news show, and then we're going to have a game show, and then we're going to have this thing, and we're going to record them all on Friday night. And we're going to start at like, let's see, like 8 p.m., but it's really going to start at 10 p.m. because it's 2 hours of troubleshooting our mics because our mics never work right. And then by the time 2 a.m. hits, and by the time that last episode's recording, it's the worst just pile. It's just an awful thing. And so like we've learned to not necessarily bite more than we can chew. Like we've learned to just be consistent and do what we can, but then at the same time, because we take it seriously, obviously, but like we don't necessarily need it financially, and so we can take those risks, like the Lupin thing, or a while back, like we just talked about the Karate Kid films. I don't remember how well that did initially, but like sometimes we don't do things where like you expect it. I mean, our name is Get At Gaming, and we started as a gaming podcast, but then we add that little plus there because we want to talk about more than gaming. We wanted to talk about anime. We wanted to talk about Cobra Kai, that new Cobra Kai show, again with Karate Kid. We wanted to talk about Deadpool. We wanted to talk about just anything we wanted to talk about. And so we're always learning, and I'm grateful for this experience for sure.
Yeah, I think that's awesome that you can kind of really leverage the things that you find interesting and that's when your passion comes out, and that's when you talk about the interesting things, and I think it's more entertaining when people are honest with what they're talking about. So I think that's really cool, and I think people, if they happen to be watching this episode, should probably go back and watch that Lupin episode and get those numbers up, because I love that movie.
It's so good.
It's definitely better than our first season. I remember, I still remember, like, my kids were like younger, so it was easier. But I was like, man, if they were like now where they have sports on Saturday, I'd be that parent just sitting there with sunglasses on, just passed out. I remember one time we spent 2.5 hours just troubleshooting why it wasn't working. It was definitely passion there. And I think if you look at that compared to now, it's just a crazy different comparison to that. But as I'm talking about us, like totally having those early episodes, when you guys were in this process of creating this game and development, what were some things that were like big challenges that you guys had? Or, I mean, hopefully it wasn't like us spending 2.5 hours on one little thing.
Yeah, well, I guess the hardest part has been funding. Since this is our first title, I guess I was just really trying to chase after getting some grant money or any other funding, publishers. We haven't had any luck with any publishers, but I was really happy that we got a grant because it meant we didn't have to get a publisher. There are other benefits to getting a publisher, of course, such as like marketing kind of consultation or contacts or the things that they can bring to the table. They have a lot of experience, obviously, especially for indie studios that don't. But yeah, that's kind of been the journey of kind of squeezing as much as I can out into the game with my my free time and my soul and my blood, sweat, and tears, and then like trying to get some funding to kind of bring a team together. Yeah, I mean it's been a passion project. It's kind of like and it's developed into something a little bit more, and it keeps going because I just keep pushing. And yeah, it's hard. Like an interesting aspect of that is kind of team sizes or kind of leadership of teams. I think it can be hard to kind of work with more than or kind of an uneven leadership team. Like, I don't know if you've done or heard of game jams. Mm-hmm. You guys know what a game jam is?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So a game jam is where a bunch of indie developers will get together over maybe a weekend or 2 or 3 days and make a game, or maybe not even a game, like an idea, an experience out of a concept. So it might be like a small kind of competition game jam where the theme is, I don't know, waterfalls or something like that. And so you like concept some ideas and you try to make this experiment which is somehow thematically related to waterfalls. But those can be tricky sometimes because maybe you've matched up with some people you haven't met before at the game jam, or maybe you're butting heads with people because there's kind of no firm leadership. People don't agree on things. So it's like it is really satisfying to be able to be the person that makes a lot of calls. At the same time, it's hard to have that balance where you are able to accept what the people in your team are telling you and also take their advice and lean on their expertise. So that's kind of like a huge learning experience for me constantly, is just kind of figuring out how to balance those two aspects. And I found that very rewarding because the game has started off as kind of my baby, but it's really started to morph more as like the team's game because it has so many ideas and concepts that people have kind of brought into it that I would have never thought of on my own, I think, or would have never gotten to. So that's been so cool and so fun. And I guess that's why a lot of the remaining games, the remaining Galaxy games that haven't been in the demo, will, I think, actually feel very different. And maybe that's a good segue for me to be able to share my screen again.
Yeah.
Would you be interested in hearing more about a few of the games that we've got
Yeah,
in
definitely.
the full game? All right. So last time we got up to basically halfway to number 6, Overload, which is bomb tag. So going from there, maybe I'll just pull out a few of my favorites. So one in particular, which I think is really fun, is Hole in One. And Hole in One is basically just golf in space.
Oh, that's really cool.
We kind of just we it became harder and harder to think of mini games to create with like gravity platforming. So I think maybe, what is it, I'd say maybe 2 or 3-ish of the games have different kind of player controllers, if that makes sense. It's kind of like, so in golf, your character is just still. They're planted on the ground, and all they're doing is shooting to get their little golf ball to orbit around some planets to land in the hole. And then so we have kind of like a round that consists of 6 holes. And you're kind of trying to shoot a hole in one first in each hole. So the first person to kind of shoot a hole in one, and it's not turn based. It's all just everyone going crazy, and all your balls can interact with each other. First person to get the hole in one will get the point, and then everyone else gets like one last attempt at that hole to get a hole in one, and then you move straight into the next hole. And so they kind of ramp up in difficulty. There's also a timer, so if you don't finish up to hole 6 within that time, then the round finishes and you go to the next round. And maybe in the future round you can get to a higher hole. But it's been really fun to develop that one and see that one grow. It's funny just coming up with the idea, because like creating these game designs of these games, these mini games, it's been like a balance between creating something unique and inventive and new versus something that people already know and understand well and that's kind of intuitive. And golf, or mini golf, is just a great example of like, we were just like brainstorming ideas, and it's just like, well, we should probably do golf because it's just like everyone likes golf. Golf games just keep coming out and being popular. And you know, inside of me, I kind of like, I'm cringing, because it's like, oh, can't we do better than that? Can't we come up with something more unique or interesting? But it's not really about that, I guess. You know, it's really great for people to kind of relate to these games as well as them being fresh and interesting. So I think hopefully the freshness comes across in it being gravity. A lot of people have compared it to what's it called, Angry Birds in space, I think. There are some parallels there, for sure. It's like there's gravity, but we're not knocking over things like Angry Birds does. You just have to get the hole in one. But it's a very fun mini game. It's certainly becoming one of my favorites, and it has a very different feel to a lot of the first 6. Another one of the new unique games that will come out, it's called Bumper Stars, and it's obviously a take on bumper cars, and you're basically just flying through the galaxy in a little bubble as your character, but you're stuck in orbit around a star or a sun. And the idea is that you can kind of, as you're floating through, it's almost like you're on rails going round and round. As you're floating through, you can move slowly around, but you also have a dash mechanic. So you can kind of charge up and then do a dash to try to knock the other players out of orbit.
Oh, nice.
Kind of like a bumper cars or sumo wrestling kind of experience, which is, I think, similar to one of the Mario Party mini games, which is a very simple one, where the character is kind of balancing on balls, just walking on balls and sort of knocking each other backwards and forwards. But our kind of interesting take is that you're kind of on rails and going around in orbit, and you're also kind of slowly moving in on the star. So it kind of has this natural climax where you get too close and you just die by falling into the sun. But that one's really fun and unique. Maybe the last one I'll mention, there are a few more in there which are also, I think, really fun, but the last one I'll mention is called Gastronomer, and it's probably the last game we'll be working on. And it's kind of like the boss level, essentially. I was really keen on doing like an asymmetric game where one of the players is kind of like in this powerful boss position. There's this game made in Australia actually called Crawl, which is like a multiplayer competitive / co-op game, which I really love, and I've always wanted to do something similar to it, where you're going through a dungeon as a human, and one player just, I think, either randomly or at the beginning, you have to fight to become the human. One player is the human, and all the other players are ghosts. And as you kind of explore this dungeon, all the ghosts are kind of inhabiting different either kind of torture traps or weapons, or they inhabit these kind of satanic circles which spawn monsters which they control to try to kill the human. So it's kind of like the dungeon versus the human. And then as soon as someone last hits the human, they then become the human. They kind of respawn as the human. So you're all fighting to be the kind of main character. So yeah, in Gastronema, there's going to be this huge kind of void imp kind of creature that is just going to be able to float around and have this sucking ability. So when it opens its mouth, it sucks the players in and kind of eats them. And that's how you gain points in that game. What you want to do is throw bombs at the boss character and kind of kick out the player that's controlling it. They're kind of like this vehicle. So I think that one might hopefully will be fun. We're still playtesting and finishing it off with some artwork. But yeah, and we've also got actually one more. Puff Panic has a cute character, which we've got like a little baby dragon in the middle of this kind of lava planet, which is going to be doing a kind of what's it called? It's just going to be shooting fireballs at you, out at you in kind of circular patterns. And you have to kind of dodge them as well as try to stay on the stage as other players try to get rid of you. So it's kind of inspired by the bullet hells, which is kind of a recreation of that genre. But yeah, I'll stop there. You'll kind of have to wait to hear about the other ones or play them in the game.
I mean, these all look really, the ones that we played, I really did like. And so I'm kind of excited. I definitely want to do golf, and I do want to do Puff Panic. Definitely checking those ones out once they come out. But yeah, I everything I saw I really liked, and the colors and the music. I mean, it all kind of just blends well together.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're lucky to get a really awesome composer and sound designer. Memo Demo. I would actually, if you like the music, go check out their SoundCloud or Bandcamp. They've got some really cool songs and tracks, and so yeah, it's not necessarily completely similar, but yeah, I was recommended to listen to their stuff by a friend of mine. And I just got in contact with Memo Demo, and we've luckily got them as the composer. So it's been kind of fun. The music really changes the game completely, and the sound effects. It's crazy how important sound and music is.
Oh yeah, I've always said that when we've talked about games, is like graphics are one thing, but sound and all that's like so important. I think that kind of just makes the game, like Alex knows what I'm going to exactly say. Ghost of Tsushima is just that. It's besides the story being so good, the sound, the music, and everything is just really well done. So yeah, I totally get where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, it kind of really brings the emotion to another level, I think, if the sound is done well. Not only the music, but if you feel like you're in that scene, it can give you goosebumps, which I think is just like, that's what you're trying to do, is create emotions as a game designer. And if you can do that, I think that's a great success. So yeah.
Cool. Well, being we're, as I described us earlier, a nerdy podcast. We talk about anything we want to talk about. We've kind of talked about, obviously I mentioned Lupin earlier, and you say that you like the Castle of Cagliostro. What are some of your favorite anime and like video games? Don't necessarily have to be tied to like inspirations, but just what are your favorites?
Yeah, well, when you mentioned Lupin the Third, Castle Cagliostro, I was going to ask you if you also like Cowboy Bebop. Have you watched or enjoyed that?
I have. I don't enjoy it as much as other people, to be honest.
Oh wow, interesting. I'm surprised.
Yeah, it's the Western people over here love Cowboy Bebop. I'm not sure. I really remember liking it when I was younger, but I've done a lot of rewatches of things lately. And so it's not that I soured on things. It's just that there are other things that I have more appreciation of now. Like I've gotten back into older things lately. Urusei Yatsura recently got a bunch of releases over here. And so it's an older comedy anime, Rumiko Takahashi, like the woman who did like Ranma 1/2 or Inuyasha. Like I've gotten into just older 80s anime all of a sudden. So like that's where I'm at right now. But like I really do like a lot of the direction, the cinematography, the music and stuff of Cowboy Bebop. There's just something about it that doesn't quite click for me, but I can appreciate what it is.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think the thing that draws me to it so much is the music.
Yeah.
And also, I guess the pacing. I think they tie together quite well. And I'm a big fan of kind of jazz and funk. I just personally, I love that kind of music. But I mean, the soundtrack is pretty unique, and what feeling it gives. It's almost like a Western as well, with some jazz in between.
Yeah.
I guess bebop, and it connects so strongly to the action. I guess, yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably for me a connection of the musical style so much. But you're right. I think the pacing is quite unusual. Like there are some really long lulls in it, and it's probably a product of its time.
Yeah.
And I think probably you couldn't get away with something that felt the same as it does being released these days. It probably wouldn't be as popular, I imagine. But yeah, that's definitely one of my favorites. I'm terrible at remembering names. Something that comes to mind is Full Metal Alchemist. That was always a big favorite of mine. I find the whole kind of different, what would you call them, like streams that were released interesting, like Brotherhood versus the original, I think it is.
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to think of some more. I got into Berserk as well. You guys know about Berserk?
Yeah, definitely.
Which really doesn't really follow a lot of the things that I have enjoyed in the past. I mean, I'm very obsessed with Ghibli, and based on the wholesomeness of my game, you wouldn't expect necessarily for me to like Berserk, but I think it came from a friend of mine kind of getting me into anime more and showing me a few things, like Ghost in the Shell as well.
Yeah,
I really loved. But yeah, I mean, there are so many genres, and like I'll try to get into anime again every now and then, just watch like Crunchyroll or something like that. And yeah, there have been a few things. Geez, what's it called? I'm blanking on the name, but it's like these. No, I won't remember it. It's like this school or academy of demon slayers or something.
Yes, it's called Demon Slayer. It's not Demon Slayer. Okay.
No,
Blue Exorcist.
No, I don't think so. But Demon Slayer, I read the manga of Demon Slayer recently too, because I also like to go backwards from like, if I go to conventions and stuff and I see lots of cosplay of certain things, it's kind of like a really good way to get a sense of what lots of people like. And I just kept seeing heaps of Demon Slayer, and I was like, I have to go and read the manga. And I think after a certain age, I stopped watching anime as well, and I started just reading the manga, which is like, I don't know. It's better and worse in different ways. Mostly better, I think, if you value your time. But
yeah, for sure. One Piece manga reading versus One Piece watching an anime. Like, valuing your time there.
Yeah, One Piece as well. I got into it for sure, but I think I didn't get close to finishing it. I guess video games. I've been obsessed with Zelda for a long time. I already kind of mentioned it. I really loved Wind Waker. That was one of my favorite Zeldas. It's just kind of like the art style was just kind of quite unique for its time, quite inventive. I loved Metroid Prime when it came out. I was a huge, not huge, but I loved my GameCube. I don't know where it came from, but like a friend of mine and I think bonded over playing Tony Hawk on the GameCube when Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4, I think it was, and we were in class math at one time, and like we hadn't met properly, and then we both just discovered that we've been playing a bunch of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4, just coincidentally on the GameCube, and then that's kind of like that was the spark of our friendship, and that's how it kind of it grew from there. So I kind of, a lot of the games that I remember are actually like similar to what we were talking about before, just remembering, you know, this friend and me, we would play a bunch of this game, or whatever else. And for me, that friend and the GameCube, it was a connection of he and I would play, like he would play Super Mario Sunshine as well. I really love that game. I love a lot of the kind of, I love Mario Odyssey. Mario Sunshine is an amazing game, maybe underappreciated, I think. And I loved Banjo-Kazooie. That was a huge game for me. Banjo-Tooie. I was really sad that they stopped making them. And I tried ukulele, but I just didn't get into it, unfortunately.
They got the Replay or whatever coming out here soon. They're remaking ukulele, so we'll see how that does.
Really?
Yeah, they're remaking it. They're making it look nicer, and they're taking a lot of the feedback from the original release of ukulele and trying to make a more concise game.
Yeah, I think concise is the right word for it.
I remember getting lost in that game and just being like, oh, I kind of just want to play Banjo-Kazooie instead, right?
Yeah, I know. It's like, I was so surprised. I was like, wow, how could they make something that's so like focused to be inspired by Banjo-Kazooie, but really not hit the mark in terms of level or world design? Or I guess like a lot of aspects were there, like the art direction seemed good, fine. That was in the right direction, but I just felt like maybe it was the controls, but more so for me, it was the world. It just didn't feel like the world of Banjo-Kazooie. And obviously they had to design a different world. It's not the same game, but it was just too, I don't know, sprawling, too huge.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Donkey Kong 64, right? Like Donkey Kong 64, I really do like that game, but there are a lot of boring big worlds in that game, and it felt very similar to ukulele. Yeah,
that's a great example. I agree with you. Like Donkey Kong was a weird game. Donkey Kong 64, is that what you said? Yeah. I don't know why I liked that so much, really. I should go and replay it.
I think it's just the Donkey Kong IP. Like, you just really like Donkey Kong. You like playing as Diddy. You like playing the guitars or just the puzzle mechanics in that. But like after the first couple levels, the level design just is more barren, in my opinion. It's very similar to ukulele.
Yeah, I think a big novelty factor for me that I remember is just the different characters that you get to understand, and it's almost like a little bit of a Metroidvania, and that you get to go through the world, and there are things that you can't access or do until you go back and unlock that character, and then experience the world through their eyes or whatever. So yeah, it was a good game. I enjoyed that one. But yeah, that's kind of that side. I also just love I guess puzzle games. I have enjoyed the Witness a lot, which is an indie game, which became very polarizing at some stage. That's probably one of my favorite games, which I really love for its kind of design principles and the puzzle. Because as I said, I like kind of meditative, relaxing games. They kind of allow you to make discoveries, and that's kind of part of my journey was like of game design was trying to figure out the balance between teaching players too much, or letting them, like, kind of holding their hand and stepping them through instructions and telling them what to do versus letting them figure things out on their own. And I think that's a particularly hard line to draw in puzzle games, because you're trying to get people to figure things out on their own. And a lot of people will bounce off puzzle games because, players will bounce off puzzle games because they get stuck somewhere, right?
Yeah.
That's like a difficult problem, and you kind of have to either tutorialize or get the difficulty ramping correct, or you have to kind of create enough forks in the road so that they can experience different puzzles. Puzzle games are super interesting to design, but I think they're so difficult as well, and I respect the people that design them well so much. I'm kind of blanking on a lot of the other games that I have kind of played. I think if I think about my brother, he used to play a bunch of Warcraft and Starcraft, and then oh, that's right. Yeah, I got into Blizzard when I was in school as well, and I played a bunch of WoW with some friends. And I remember kind of going on camp with a good friend of mine, and like we would just talk about WoW constantly. Like, we didn't really enjoy the camping experience, but it's kind of like that's where we started our we deepened our friendship through WoW, and that kind of started me getting into the game a lot more. And I never really got that good, to be honest. I was never raiding or anything. But yeah, I loved all the kind of, except for Diablo, I loved a lot of Blizzard franchise, to be honest. And I think they've got some amazing game designers in that company. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Like, there's so many games that I grew up with that brought really good friendships with people because we played it. So, all right. So I'm going to hit you with the big final question of the day. So anyone that's listening that wants to be an indie game developer or get into working with, producing their own first game, like, what advice would you give them? Or what kind of things of kind of help them along the way with their first project with you already at this point now? Like, what kind of advice or things you could tell them?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's tricky, I think, because maybe the first thing that you want to do is find out what kind of road you want to take. Like, do you want to be an artist? Do you want to do 3D modeling? Do you want to do sound? Do you want to be a programmer? Or do you want to do it all? Maybe figuring that out is a good step, or at least a good question to ask yourself. And the way you can do that, or at least the way I think is a good way to do that, is to find these some communities, or that thing that I mentioned earlier, game jams. If you can just try to make things, and I think make things with friends as well, at least that's kind of my advice. And I think that's not the same for everyone else. I think there are some incredible indie devs that just do everything themselves, and they're so good at being efficient with their time, and making assets and making and designing gameplay that they can finish in a short space of time. Like, they'll get amazing at their pixel art workflow, their animation workflow, and designing levels and all that kind of stuff. I know a few people that are like that, and I have no idea how they do the things that they do. If you're that kind of person, I think you'll figure it out on your own, to be honest. Those people are just incredibly smart. But otherwise, I think, like, talking to people that are also interested in these kinds of things at events and game jams just kind of gives you, it teaches you a lot about, what tools to maybe try out, what experiments you want to do, what you can learn from other people, just on your own, versus maybe what courses you can do. Do you want to do a course? There are a lot of courses that are expensive and they're not necessarily going to be beneficial. Do you want to learn something and then try to get a job at a big company, which can be very difficult for some people, because it can be quite competitive depending on where you're living. So yeah, maybe just try to find something that you enjoy. Try to make things that you can put in front of people and they react in ways that make you happy, make you proud of the things that you've made. I think for me, that's a big thing that I really get out of the whole thing is being able to plop a screen down in front of someone, and then just kind of take a step back and just kind of watch them go through the experience that I've spent, that we've spent years working on. It's like you encapsulate all this work into, a relatively short experience, maybe replayable, but it's kind of like it's very satisfying to watch people going into, doing the things you expect, following the design patterns that you want them to do, or maybe even it's very satisfying as well to see them do the opposite of what you expect. Like find a glitch or a bug, or go over to some part of the map that you don't want them to, but they do something fun or interesting anyway. So the whole thing is, I think, a big experiment and just kind of very fun. So yeah, finding your own motivation is probably the right way to go about it. I think that was a bad answer, but it's not an easy question.
No, and I think that really well sets it up. With I always talk about us doing this podcast. when I wanted to do it, and I started talking to Spencer, who was on the show originally, he's like, I don't know, man. He's like, I don't think you're taking it serious. And I said, no, we are. We had a lot of hiccups at the beginning. To look where we are now is learning from other people. So you're right on that. So yeah, that's a perfect answer. I know it was a difficult question. We make sure that all these questions, like, they kind of trick you into thinking, oh, that's an easy question, but yet there's like a hidden depth to it there. So yeah, so we are definitely glad to have you on the show. We were going to put the links there. The game is Which Way Up Galaxy Games. The demo is out right now on Steam, with the full game coming out pretty soon, hopefully in the next seeable future. I would suggest everyone to download the demo, give it a try. Alex and I played it and had a blast. I do think Alex cheated for 90% of it, which is a different podcast altogether, but it was still a fun game. I will have all the links on our Facebook, X, and Instagram, and then there will also be links in the description for this podcast here, for our audio and for our YouTube. Again, we want to thank Nick. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah.
Talking to us about all kinds of stuff. I feel like after talking about the video game stuff, about what is nostalgic about my Nintendo, I got to call my brother now. So thank you so much
for having me. It's been a pleasure to meet you guys and get to know you and talk about the game a little bit. It's really cool. And yeah, we've got a Kickstarter coming out very soon. So if you want to get some cute little plushy characters, or kind of pre-order the game and support us to help us finish the game, we've got little key rings as well that we're kind of giving away. We've got some stickers. Yeah, check out our Kickstarter. We've also got, we're going to be in a little Steam celebration with Wholesome Games this upcoming week, and that's part of the reason why we are updating the demo. So it's going to have a bunch more kind of little tweaks and improvements here and there. Including that little feature that I added, that I mentioned, to Comet Collect. So yeah, well, yeah, thank you so much for having me again. Hopefully you guys will enjoy the full game.
Oh, we definitely will, and we'll definitely get your Kickstarter. We'll get that on our social media as well, so you guys can support them. If you're listening to the podcast, the things that he is showing here are super cool, like the little crochet characters and the keychains and the stickers. So we'll get that as well on social media as well, so you guys can like jump in on this Kickstarter. So one way we always finish the show, Nick, is I usually will ask Alex or whoever's, when we switch turns, of like, hey, was there anything else? And then we have to say, he says, get at it. We just go down the line. Everybody says it. That's how we end every show. So we would love if you would jump in on that with us here, and we could end the show. So Alex, was there anything else you want to add?
Just to get at it.
Well, I also think that we should probably get at it.
Get at it.